Marcus M.C. Truth Thompson had spent the morning in the campus library, poring over textbooks and scribbling rhymes about student debt and diversity initiatives that seemed more like lip service than real change. As a first-generation college student, he knew the weight of every dollar he'd borrowed and the sting of feeling invisible in crowded lecture halls. When lunchtime rolled around, he and his crew carried a battered boombox and portable speakers out to the sunlit quad, weaving through clusters of students huddled over laptops and steaming coffee cups. He set the boombox on a low stone wall, tapped the speaker twice, and queued up a hard-hitting beat he'd produced himself. Snare crisp as a new dollar bill, bass thumping like a rallying cry. The chatter of the quad hushed as students turned to see him step forward in a crisp hoodie and weathered jeans. He lifted the mic and launched into his verses, lines about tuition that soared past inflation, about counselors who offered pamphlets instead of empathy, about the solitude of staying awake with flashcards while classmates partied. His flow was precise, each syllable landing with the impact of a gavel, each rhyme revealing a truth buried beneath campus brochures and glossy mission statements. As he delivered his final bar, "They teach us to conform, but we're bred to perform. So I spit for the overlooked, light this mic like reform," the quad erupted. Students snapped fingers in salute, others banged beats on tables, and some pulled out phones to capture the moment. Professors on nearby benches leaned forward in surprise, while campus security officers glared from a distance, their radios crackling with talk of unauthorized amplification. Marcus paused the track, his breath steady, and smiled at the crowd that had gathered. Faces of every background united in the pulse of his words. In that charged silence, he knew he had opened a dialogue deeper than any lecture could reach, and that his cipher had only just begun. As the last echoes of his rhyme faded into the afternoon air, Marcus reached down to turn the boombox off. But before he could press pause, two campus security officers emerged from behind a row of flowering shrubs. One, a tall man with mirrored sunglasses perched on his cap, barked, "Turn that down now! You're disturbing the peace." The other unfurled a small handbook as if it were a weapon, tapping it against his palm. Marcus set his mic down gently and squared his shoulders. "Officer, I'm not disturbing anyone. They're here by choice," he said, gesturing to the crowd, which had swelled to dozens of nodding heads and raised fists. "I'm exercising my right to free speech on public property." The taller officer stepped closer, voice low but urgent. "You need a permit to perform here. The university policies require prior approval for amplified sound." His partner snapped the handbook open to a highlighted section, reading the fine print aloud while students leaned in, breath held. Marcus's jaw tightened. He glanced at his crew, DJ Spin spinning a reflective gaze, Frida clutching her notebook, brandishing lyrics she'd offer in solidarity later, and found strength in their solidarity. He turned back to the officers, voice calm but firm. "You're saying I need permission to speak truth to power? To call out tuition hikes and campus bias? That any word against the status quo must be rubber-stamped?" A hush fell over the quad. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, the handbook forgotten for a heartbeat, as the weight of his question settled. A student shouted, "Let him speak!" and others echoed, "Free speech!" The officer in sunglasses pressed the brim of his hat, jaw working beneath the dark lenses. "We have regulations to maintain order. Without them, this place turns chaotic." Marcus nodded, stepping toward them. "Chaos or conversation? You think silencing us keeps order? But it just masks the frustration bubbling beneath. If you shut me down now, I won't stop speaking. Just move somewhere else until you learn to listen." The partner's hand twitched uncertainly over his radio. For a moment, it seemed the officers might try to seize the mic, to cut the track mid-beat. Instead, the taller officer exhaled through his nose, the tension in his shoulders loosening. He snapped the handbook shut. We'll discuss with our supervisor. For now, you can keep going, but keep it down after 15 minutes." A ripple of relieved cheers went through the students. Marcus picked up his mic again, the brassy defiance in his veins amplified, and pressed play. As the beat dropped and he dove back into verse, the campus cops melted into the periphery, faces unreadable but respectful, silent witnesses to a cipher that refused to be silenced. Within hours of the quad confrontation, The handheld video of MC Truth standing toe-to-toe with campus cops went viral. By late afternoon, his YouTube clip had racked up tens of thousands of views, the comment section swelling with messages like, "This is why I came to college," and "Campus free speech saved." Instagram stories and TikTok riffs sampled his best bars, looping the moment he challenged the handbook with constitutional rights. Screenshots of policy pages exploded across Twitter with annotations, "Who wrote this? Who enforces this? Let's demand answers." On the following Monday, the student government chamber buzzed with more energy than any election season. Representatives from every dorm, every club, and even the International Student Council filled the benches, some wearing t-shirts reading, "Mic on, ears open." Marcus stood at the podium alongside a row of his crew, their boombox perched to one side as a silent participant. He began by performing a fresh couplet, this time spit a cappella, reminding listeners of the campus's founding motto and how its promise was empty without real dialogue. After his performance, he laid out concrete demands. Any student-led spoken word or musical performance under 10 minutes should be automatically permitted. Noise level thresholds should be measured objectively, not subjectively. And any disciplinary action over speech must be publicly recorded, with a clear appeals process. As he spoke, student senators nodded vigorously, scribbling his words into their notebooks and on their phones. Debate erupted when the student body president, initially cautious, asked whether the new rules might invite abuse. Marcus responded directly, "Speech can challenge, but without fear of censorship, it builds community. If someone misuses the mic, let's address that instance. Don't ban the mic for everyone." His answer earned applause that rattled the wooden chamber. By evening, the Senate voted unanimously to pass the Free Expression in the Quad resolution, instructing the administration to revise the speech code within 2 weeks. The resolution included Marcus's exact language, and the student government promised weekly Cipher sessions to keep conversation alive. Outside the chamber, a line of students formed to congratulate him, handing him pens and legal pads to help draft their submission to the university's policy committee. As dusk settled on campus, Marcus and his crew returned to their favorite spot in the quad. He pressed play and launched into a victory cipher, the crowd's cheers mixing with the track's bass. Security officers lingered at the edges, this time nodding along rather than demanding silence. Silent witnesses to a movement that had begun with a single verse and had grown into an anthem for every student's right to speak. When the student government's resolution landed on the president's desk, the administration's initial response was a guarded promise of review. Behind closed doors in the ivory-paneled policy office, a task force of deans, campus council, and security chiefs huddled over Marcus's demands. They debated the risks of unregulated noise against the university's mission of open dialogue. Some worried that permitting spontaneous performances would invite chaos. Others acknowledged that silencing students had only fueled their resolve and public scrutiny. 2 weeks later, the administration convened a public forum in the largest lecture hall, banners reading "Your Voice Matters" flanking the stage. Lines of students snaked around the building, clutching notebooks and phones. On the platform sat the dean of students, the campus security director, and 2 chairs reserved for student speakers, including Marcus. When the forum opened, the dean thanked everyone for their passion but cautioned that policy change takes careful consideration. Murmurs of impatience rippled through the audience as security staff tested their microphones and the overhead lights hummed. Marcus rose to speak amid the charged hush. He began by reciting the university's own charter on free inquiry, his voice steady. "If inquiry without fear is our foundation, then we must allow voices unfiltered to flow through these quad spaces." He walked the stage's edge, making eye contact with every row, recounting how coded policies had muffled students' pleas long before his cipher. Without notes, he delivered precise critiques of each problematic clause, its vague definitions of disturbance, its closed-door permit process, its lack of transparency on disciplinary records, and translated them into stories of silenced poets and muted activists. When the security director rose to respond, his measured tone betrayed unease. He acknowledged the validity of Marcus's points, but warned of potential logistical nightmares if every student could perform on a whim. Marcus countered immediately, asking whether the university would forbid debates, protests, or even shouted recitations in classroom hallways, and pointing to countless other campuses that had thrived under clear, student-friendly policies. His questions hung in the air, undeniable in their logic. By the forum's end, the administration agreed to draft a new expressive spaces policy, incorporating a streamlined digital permit system that auto-approved performances under 15 minutes and established decibel limits based on scientific measurement rather than subjective judgment. A transparent public log of all permit decisions and any subsequent complaints would be published weekly. As the hall emptied, students clustered around Marcus, praising how he had turned policy wonk's own language against them, demanding both accountability and freedom. Within days, the draft policy was posted online for campus-wide comment, and a follow-up forum was scheduled, this time convened by student leaders. Marcus's name headed the list of guest speakers invited to refine the language. When the final policy passed 2 weeks later, it was celebrated as one of the nation's most progressive campus free speech frameworks, proof that a single bold cipher could topple barriers and rewrite the rules governing every voice on campus. The morning the new expressive spaces policy took effect, Marcus returned to the quad at noon with his boombox and a fresh verse in hand. He placed his gear beneath the old oak tree, once a gathering spot for clipboards and permit forms, now officially recognized as a free speech zone, and cued a crisp beat. As students darted through classes on the winding paths above, his voice cut through the bustle, unpacking lines about institutional accountability and the power of collective voice. No security officers approached. Instead, faculty and staff paused, phones in hand, watching the quad transform into an open mic arena. By afternoon, dozens of performers had followed his lead. A poet recited a heartfelt sonnet about mental health. A cellist swept arpeggios through the air. An activist group projected social justice slides onto the library's limestone wall while chanting solidarity chants. Each act lasted under 15 minutes, perfectly within policy, yet electrifying the campus with renewed energy. Passers-by stopped to watch. Professors joined in applause, and student groups organized mini lineups on the spot, all without a single permit delay or bureaucratic objection. Word spread to local media that the university's quad had become the loudest classroom in America, where policy and practice converged in real time. A morning news crew arrived to film a segment on campus innovation, interviewing Marcus as he introduced the next performer, a classical pianist whose parents had emigrated from Ghana, her music melding Beethoven with West African rhythms. "This is what free expression looks like," Marcus told the camera, his grin wide with pride. That evening, the campus newspaper's headline hailed, "Voices Unleashed, Quad Alive Under New Policy," featuring photos of Marcus mid-cipher and a collage of student acts. In departmental emails, deans invited students to hold Expressive Thursdays, a weekly showcase of spoken word, music, and dance. Campus security's memo circulated with congratulatory remarks, reminding officers that their new role was to support, not stifle, authorized performances. Walking home past the now quiet quad lanterns, Marcus paused under the oak. He ran a hand along its carved initials, names and dates etched during the draft process. He smiled, recalling the first confrontation that had sparked this transformation. Tomorrow, he knew, another performer would step up, perhaps a budding politician reciting an impassioned speech or a visual artist unveiling a guerrilla projection. In every echo of rhyme and melody that filled the quad, he saw the living proof that policy could follow purpose, and that a single rapper's stand could rewrite an entire campus's rules. As autumn approached, the university's quad had settled into a vibrant rhythm of expression that stretched well beyond the midday hour. Marcus arrived one crisp morning to find campus facilities crews stringing up festoon lights between the oak's lowest limbs, creating a gentle canopy of illumination for evening performances. A chalkboard sign stood at the oak's base. Expressive Evenings. All voices welcome, complete with a handwritten schedule, inviting spoken word poets, folk guitarists, and student playwrights. That first evening under the lights, Marcus kicked things off with a collaborative cipher. Each guest in the circle contributed a line, building a tapestry of perspectives that wove together stories of heritage, mental health, and environmental justice. Behind them, the library's facade served as an impromptu screen where student filmmakers projected abstract animations responding to the verses. The crowd, faculty in scarves, undergraduates in hoodies, alumni visiting for homecoming, swayed in unison, their cheers echoing through the lamplit hush. Over the next weeks, the events grew in ambition and diversity. A physics major debuted an electro-jazz fusion set wired through Marcus's boombox. A group of international students choreographed a contemporary dance against projections of their home landscapes. And the Pre-Law Society staged a short courtroom drama decrying campus housing inequities. Campus clubs signed up to curate entire evenings. One night, the LGBTQ+ Alliance hosted drag performers alongside a P-Flag choir. Another, the Environmental Coalition led narrative walks through living art installations, placed among the quad's flower beds. Behind the scenes, Marcus worked with the Dean of Student Affairs to formalize expressive evenings as an accredited co-curricular program. He drafted a proposal for a small stipend fund to compensate performers and technicians, ensuring that students from all economic backgrounds could participate without financial burden. The Student Activities Office allocated a portion of the event's budget, and a local arts foundation pledged a matching grant. Suddenly, what had begun as a single rap cipher blossomed into a sustainable platform, complete with sound checks, volunteer ushers, and even a student-run concession stand selling chai and popcorn. One evening, as the sky deepened to slate blue, Marcus watched a first-year engineering student step into the light. She adjusted her helmet, welding goggles repurposed as a mask, and began to recite a poem about forging community in a cold, data-driven world. The quad fell silent, enraptured by the raw honesty in her voice. When she finished, Marcus joined her on stage, wrapping her in a high five that sparked an eruption of cheers. He realized then that the quad was no longer just a space for protest or art. It had become a crucible for confidence, where the act of speaking could transform timid freshmen into campus leaders. As winter neared, the university announced its highest turnout in memory: record enrollment, record engagement in student organizations, record attendance at campus events. Administrators quietly credited the new culture of openness with improving mental health metrics and lowering disciplinary incidents, as students felt both heard and responsible for each other's expression. When the annual campus report cited the expressive evenings as a key driver of campus vibrancy, Marcus felt the germ of his solitary cipher had grown into a legacy that would outlast any policy or semester. Under the lantern-dappled oak, he closed his eyes against the chill, breathing in the hushed applause and knowing that free speech had become not just a right, but the lifeblood of campus community. By spring, the quad's transformation had become the university's signature story, attracting attention far beyond campus borders. A delegation from 3 peer institutions visited for a week-long symposium titled Lessons in Open Dialogue, and Marcus was invited to deliver the keynote address. Standing beneath the oak whose branches had once sheltered his defiant cipher, he spoke to administrators and student leaders about the power of listening as much as speaking. On a warm afternoon, he recalled the first moment 2 campus cops had tried to cut his mic, and how each encounter had driven him to insist on clearer, fairer rules. He described the student government's midnight drafting sessions, the administration's uneasy but ultimately earnest policy revisions, and the surge of creativity that followed each new open mic night. As he spoke, slides showed dancers under lanterns, poets under the oak, and engineers performing dramas by floodlight, testaments to a culture reborn through unguarded expression. Following his keynote, Marcus joined a roundtable with presidents of the visiting campuses. They shared blueprints for adopting their own expressive spaces frameworks, discussing decibel meters calibrated for lecture halls, digital permits with automatic approvals, and annual audits led by student faculty committees. Each leader left with a copy of the original policy language and a promise to return the next year with their own quad success stories. Back home, the university's student newspaper ran a profile on Marcus titled MC Truth, architect of campus culture, and alumni donors funded a permanent outdoor stage, complete with professional lighting and sound, dedicated to free speech and artistic exploration. The new Truth stage was unveiled in a ceremony under the oak, with Marcus leading the ribbon cutting before launching into a celebratory cipher that echoed through the surrounding buildings. That afternoon, as he packed away his boombox one final time, he watched a young freshman step up to test the new stage. She cleared her throat and began a spoken-word piece about her first days on campus. Her hopes, her fears, her discovery that her voice mattered. Students and faculty alike formed a spontaneous circle around her, snapping their fingers in encouragement. Marcus smiled, realizing that the torch had passed to a new generation, eager to shape their own dialogues. Walking away under the sprawling branches, Marcus reflected that his journey, from a solitary rap in the quad to a movement that reshaped free speech policies nationwide, had been powered by a single truth. When people are given space to speak, they will rewrite the rules not just of campus, but of community itself. And as the oak's leaves whispered in the breeze, he knew the legacy of that first cipher would keep alive the promise of open dialogue for years to come.